Welcome to the Business Playbook. Business Playbook is brought to you by Alleyoop. We're a performance marketing PPC agency specialising in Google Ads, and we're sponsored today by A1 SEO, putting you at the top of Google. We're going to get started with our first of three guests today, Danny from HOKO. Danny, thanks very much for joining us on the Business Playbook.
Thanks for having me.
I'd like to start the podcast by asking everyone the same question. I'm a big believer that everyone's winging it. No one's actually got their shit together. But you have built HOKO from scratch, the Homeowners Architect Studio. You've got a team of 14. You turn over $1 million for the last 3 years. You do 150 projects a year. These are home renovations and extensions, so really important jobs with a lot on the line. You've built the market-leading home owner architects practice in Scotland. You are a judge on Scotland's Home of the Year, which is the BBC's most watched show in Scotland after the news and sport. Not only that, you've got 3 young boys and you live a very, very active life. Have you got your shit together?
Not even a tiny bit. Yeah, never have, never will probably.
So taking it right back to the very beginning, before HOKO, I believe that you were quite entrepreneurial from a very young age.
Yeah, from day one really. So I was a middle child. So I think
The overlooked middle child. I was the same.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny how that there's a trend there. So yeah, I think being the middle child, you're always kind of a bit squashed, and I think by the nature of that, I became quite independent and would find my own things to amuse myself. Yep. And I definitely kind of enjoyed the kind of social aspects of, negotiating and sort of trying to make things happen, like creating games and stuff. And that sort of spun off into, even from primary school. I changed my name to Bob one year, randomly. I came downstairs in the morning for breakfast and said, I'm now Bob. And that was it. I was Bob for like 2 years.
Oh, they're calling you?
My family, my friends, everybody. I just changed. I became Bob, who was like this different personality. And I ended up getting one of those like cassette player things where you could like burn cassettes. Yep. And I started to get the Bob, the Builder theme music and actually burn it. And I was selling them in school, these like copies of cassettes, which makes me sound so incredibly old, but that was the 90s. It feels like so long ago. So that was like the first venture. And then the village got a coffee shop, and I went in and asked
What village was that?
Gairlochhead.
Right.
So Gairlochhead, just at the very end of the Clyde. Right. And we got a village cafe, and it was like huge news. Right. And I just went in one day and said, "Can I wash the cars for your customers?" Mm-hmm. And even from that age, was leveraging the cuteness of being a kid to get more customers. Yep. You got to know what tools you got at your fingertips, and then got one of my pals to kind of help me as well. And it kind of kicked off from there into so many different side hustles until I got to now.
Right. So when we talk about those side hustles, I believe you opened a crepe van.
Yeah. So the crepe stall was. I didn't realise how many permissions and stuff you needed to actually have a legitimate crepe stall. Mm-hmm. I went on holiday, and in these kind of Mediterranean towns, at the end of the night, you're down by the harbour and you get a crepe in the hotel, and it's just like the best thing. Right. So I thought, I'm bringing that to Glasgow. Why don't we have this outside nightclubs? So when I was in first year of uni, I got the equipment to make crepes, out and about, and just started making them. And I made say van, it was a cart, like a homemade cart. It did reasonably well. The police stopped me a few times. I had to go get a street trader's license and stuff like that.
So you did go through that process eventually?
Eventually, yeah. And that's kind of where I got the stumbling block. I think this is a problem for the Scottish Government to pick up, actually. Right. I'm not like harbouring any long-seated resentment or a grudge, but that was the one. That was my $1 million idea, and I had to abandon it. I ended up at the City Chambers in Glasgow, in a giant like courtroom, and there was a guy kind of passing judgment on like different street traders, and I was in that kind of street trader world, and I was 17, and I had to stand up, give my business pitch, and the guy said, no, you need a Mr. Whippy van at least. I didn't have 20 grand, so I had to pivot into something else.
Sorry, because when you go to, like you say, European countries or like New York, and people are literally trading off these wee cars, so that's just not something that Glasgow City Council were up for letting you do.
I know, so they squashed it, probably for the good of everybody's health, but yeah.
You then so you said that was first year at uni. You then set up a student odd job business.
Yeah, so
talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, so the whole premise of that business was basically the flyer was odd job from James Bond.
All right, okay.
But instead of...
Is that the one with the cat? No, it was on the bowler hat.
Is it Goldfinger?
Yeah,
so he's got... Yeah, he throws the hat,
that's the one,
So Odd Job was there, and instead of holding the hat, he was holding a paintbrush. and I got like 500 flyers made up, and I just went and put them everywhere in the West End where I was living, and it was just inundated with jobs to do for people.
Oh, really? Took
Yeah.
off. Brilliant.
So stupidly, huge mistake, I put my hourly rate on the flyers,
Right.
so that when
what was the hourly rate at the time?
I think it was maybe £10 an hour.
Right, okay.
Something
And were
like
you
that.
farming those jobs out to students for
I did
for a
eventually
markup?
because there was so many. So then I ended up, negotiating terms with other students that they would do it for £7.50 an hour, and I'd take the rest.
Right, cool.
But then it became a problem of like controlling the quality.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very quickly like dealing with a lot of these kind of different problems in a way that was fairly low key.
Mm-hmm.
But I would go from being a cleaner in somebody's like nice loft apartment, to then dog sitting, to then clearing rubble, to then going back getting someone shopping. And it kept me really busy, but it was cash in hand. It kept me
so you didn't
afloat.
have like a payment platform or somewhere that people could list jobs. It was
No.
a case of take the order, cash job, and then go and do it, or hand it out to
I was just
someone
trying to turn up on time.
Aye,
That
yeah,
was
okay,
like my
cool.
number one task. Turn up on time, get the job done, keep them happy. Bit of a laugh and a joke, build rapport, and that was the thing. But
And
yeah,
people
I really enjoyed that.
Repeat customers, people then coming
Yeah,
back.
there
and
was a
getting you for
few.
Loads of other different projects. And
Yeah,
Brilliant. Cool. So at that time, you're studying architecture.
I was studying architecture at the art school in Glasgow.
Right. I heard a story you told about how you got into architecture, or why you got into architecture.
Yeah.
So from school, you were good at was it art and design?
Yeah, not really. I always did art and stuff when I was a kid. Not particularly strong at any particular subject. I was quite an anxious person when it came to thinking about my future.
Yep.
And
Pressure that when people give you the what are you going to be when you're older? Is that
yeah, there was that
felt
thing,
that?
but I think also my dad was really successful.
Okay.
So he's a maxillofacial surgeon. To be
Facial surgeons.
yeah, so
Right.
maxillofacial is you do a dentist degree first.
Right. Cool.
So it's one of the hardest kind of consultancies to kind of.
Dentist, 7 years and then
Yeah, it's just I remember him still doing exams when we were in school.
right. Cool.
So he was training for a long time, and he did that whilst bringing up a young family. Was very strict with himself, very morally sound man, which for a young man is quite an intimidating thing, because you're constantly getting pulled by your wants and urges and things that you maybe are taking you in different directions.
Yep.
When you've got this kind of pillar of what is a good man right in front of you, who's unyielding, but also at the same time telling you what your potential is. So
very supportive in that, as much as you felt the pressure, is that
hugely supportive. I can't overemphasize how supportive he's been, how encouraging with life lessons, but at the same time not letting me get away with stuff, which as a parent I can now see is the most challenging bit. When a kid doesn't want to do something that's in their best interest, it's very hard to make them do it, but in a way where you still preserve your relationship.
Yep.
So I've got an absolute tremendous amount of respect for him, but it definitely kind of built into me this huge kind of internal pressure that you're going to do something big, and that you need to kind of fulfill that potential within yourself, that actually being average is not good enough at all. It's way below what the expectations are.
So can I jump in, right? So I consume a lot of content from Eddie Hearn, who's the boxing promoter behind Matchroom. He took over the business from his dad, and he talks about the way that his dad was with him and is with his grandkids, and the way that it's kind of influenced his own parenting. So his dad was the exact same. Never bowled a soft ball, basically. Everything is as hard as possible, win at all costs.
Yeah.
But the way that he is now with his kids, he kind of has softened that.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you would parent the exact same way and try and encourage that, or do you think that you soften it at all? Because you said that you got that kind of anxiousness from that. The
thing I've realised is that every child is different.
Yep.
They can't be parented in the same way.
Cool.
And I see that with my brothers. The three of us are wildly different. And have all gone in kind of different directions. We've all ended up carrying the same values. The core values are the things that you need to stick to.
Yep.
So there's definitely.
So your brothers aren't in the same line of work, or
weirdly we all ended up kind of performing in some weird way, which was never a thing in our family. That was
so obviously you were the TV presenter. What did your two brothers do?
So my older brother is an opera singer.
Right, okay.
And my younger brother, before he got ill, was an actor, and he is an actor and a writer and a poet.
Brilliant. Right, okay, cool.
So there's we all managed to find that thing in ourselves, which I think we kind of got a lot more from my mum, which was about, you can express yourself, and it's okay, you've got good things to say. But yeah, there's huge amounts of there's a huge number of lessons that I've taken from my father's parenting.
Yep.
It certainly wasn't win at all costs, but it was certainly, play hard and don't take prisoners.
Brilliant. And you played rugby?
Yeah, so I played rugby, did judo, did pole vaulting.
Pole vaulting?
Yeah, so I was actually the West of Scotland's under-16s pole vault champion in Scotland, so I was the only one.
We never got that into your intro.
I know, I was the only one, yeah. I cleared the opening height, and that was it, so yeah.
Brilliant. But your mum's input was what made you kind of pursue a career in architecture?
Yeah, that's right. So the kind of anxiety of, I need to do something that is acceptable and noteworthy.
Yeah.
Kind of like was scratching around for options because there was no kind of obvious talent. And then I had one teacher in school, Mr. Cameron at Hermitage Academy, who said when I was doing graphic design with the drawing board and stuff, he said, "Oh, you're quite good at this."
Yep.
And he must have just got me on a good day. So I went home and I asked my mum, what jobs use graphic communication.
Yep.
And straight away she was hysterical. She was like, "Oh my God, you're going to be an architect. You're going to be an architect." You're jumping up and down. And from that moment on, I had an answer.
So you just pursued it blindly. Now I'm going to be an architect.
Well, I had something I could say, like, what are you going to be? I'm going to be an architect.
I've done the exact same
thing. So my mum seems excited by it, so that's what I'll do. That obviously was going to make her happy.
I asked my dad when I was very, very young, who makes the most money? And he said, lawyers. And then I studied law. Blindly. Didn't even think about it. Going to study law. And then realised after 10 minutes of studying law that I definitely didn't want to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
But seen the degree out, because when I was like 9 years old, my dad said, lawyers make the most money.
Yeah.
Great, I'm going to go do that.
Yeah.
Wildly incorrect.
Yeah.
But pursued it anyway. So you then went into study architecture.
Yeah. So
started these side hustles through uni.
Yeah.
Graduated. So was that 26? No. What year was it that you graduated architecture?
So I graduated in 2012.
2012.
So I joined in 2008 when I was 17.
And then you went travelling? Or?
Yeah, so I absolutely struggled through the course. The art school is an amazing institute. But yeah, they definitely kind of pushed the boat out in terms of your showmanship and how you kind of present your stuff. And I was very literal. So kind of struggled through, barely scraped through my degree. And then the way architecture works is you do a degree, you go out for a year in practice, like work on a job, you then go back and do another degree, you then go out to practice again. Never actually being able to say you're an architect, you're an architectural assistant. And then you go through your chartership, which is like a series of exams, interviews and case study reports and stuff like that. So
how long does it take in total?
The minimum it takes is 7 years.
Right. And how long does it take on average, would you say?
I think most people probably do it in about 10.
Really? Right, okay.
Yeah.
It's really intense.
And I think most people get to that point where they're so far in that
too late to
not being able to say you're an architect is this thing that's hanging over you, where everybody thinks you're an architect and you always have to correct them because it's like a protected title and stuff as well. So it's
you
just
said friends and family would call you an architect when you're architectural assistant.
Yeah, my mum used to do it all the time and it used to drive me insane. She'd be meeting a builder or something who's doing some renovation work. She said, "Oh, this is my son, he's an architect." And I have to go with that awkward thing of being like, "I'm not an architect, just so you know," and it just makes the whole thing weird. So
yeah, I know what you mean. So then you went to Vancouver?
Yeah, well, after my undergraduate degree, I applied for a whole load of jobs in Glasgow and couldn't get them. And
in architecture?
In architecture,
right.
Yeah. I was really struggling. I was after my degree, I was maybe a month and a half before I managed to kind of find something. And the job that I found was at a zoo down in England, designing animal enclosures. A really kind of unique job. I think they told me there was something like 150 applicants for the job. And I was probably the least qualified and managed to get it somehow. And I think it was just down to like the presentation that I did on the day, which I just kind of like just totally went for it. Right. And I think that was kind of a turning point for me where I thought, you can present, you can really go for it, because they did say that. When you say
you went for it, with the way that you delivered that presentation?
With like both barrels personality.
Right, okay.
To the point where it didn't even really matter the content I was showing. It was more about, this guy's going to be high energy, he's going to be a good cultural fit, he cares about the subject matter, we can train him, which is kind of what I was going for. So yeah, that was kind of a really nice little kind of keystone memory I think I've got in my head about, a valuable thing in business is you need to like take the cuffs off sometimes and just absolutely go for it. Like be a bit American.
I remember my boss when I worked at Bauer Media. There was a guy presenting, and this is the future of this, and this is the future of that, and he was like, he's so compelling that he could be standing up there telling you that the moon's made of cheese, and you believe him because of the way that he delivers it. So in that kind of delivery style, we're going to get on to your now presenting gig.
Yeah.
But obviously, pre that.
Yeah.
You went to the this job in the zoo.
Yeah.
How long were you there?
So I was there for about 18 months.
Right. Did you enjoy it?
I absolutely loved it.
Designing animal enclosures?
Yeah, design animal enclosures.
Okay.
But the thing that I loved about it was I was always fascinated with nature. And for the first few months I was living in the zoo. Right. So I was living in the same accommodation that the zookeepers were at. So if there was a problem with one of the animals, sometimes they would take them back to the accommodation. And I remember, I'm probably going to get someone in trouble now, but I don't really care. I remember I got a knock at my bedroom door at like 11 o'clock at night. And it was this zookeeper, who I won't name, who said to me, she was like, "Oh, how are you doing?" And we hadn't really chatted before, and I was new. And she said, "Oh, just thought you might be interested, but I've got a baby Western lowland gorilla in the room next door if you want to come and play with him." And I was like, yes, that is like as far as like chat up lines go, that's up there. So I went round and there was this like critically endangered.
Johnny's going to use that.
It wasn't an innuendo. It was an actual gorilla. So I went through and played with this like baby gorilla for hours, and it was the most like surreal, magical thing.
This is not where I thought this podcast was going. This is proper Tiger King stuff.
Yeah, it was wild. But like waking up to the sound of the howler monkeys and stuff was pretty incredible. So it was really kind of novel experience. Didn't learn anything about architecture. But I met my wife there as well, so that was quite cool.
Was your wife the one who knocked the door?
No, it wasn't.
No, right.
It wasn't. No.
Maybe cut that bit out. So you met your wife there?
Yeah, I met her there. So she was in the research department.
Then she went to Vancouver with you?
No, she didn't.
No, she didn't. Right, okay.
Yeah, so
talk us through this big move.
Yeah, so that was probably the most impulsive I've ever been. This sounds really cheesy, but I went to a Darren Brown show,
right,
which I was invited by my brother-in-law, right, my wife and the sister, and they did the whole hypnosis thing, and it never really gets me. It doesn't really seem to work. And he did this whole thing at the end where he got everyone to stand up and you closed your eyes, and it was kind of like a guided meditation where he talks you through unleashing your potential and unlocking barriers in your life and all that sort of stuff. And there was a bit of kind of theatrics with sounds and light and everything like that, and everyone felt really good about it, and it was nice. It was a good show. Everyone clapped, went home, and the next day I went into my job for a big house builder at the time near Birmingham. And I just went in and said, "Yeah, I'm gonna leave my job today." I had like a cottage that we were renting. I had so many commitments down there. It was the middle of the rugby season, and I just said I'm gonna go and do something else. I just finished my degree a month before.
Googled where's the best place to live in the world.
Yeah, and Vancouver was the first one.
So you moved to the place with the best SEO.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So yeah, I googled best place to live in the world. Vancouver was number one, and then I googled best rugby team in Vancouver, and it came up with this team. And then I emailed them, and they emailed me back and said, "Have you got any footage?" Sent them some footage, and they said, "Yeah, we'll take you."
Brilliant.
And that was in the space of half a day.
So there is a lesson there. The doors that sport can then open for you.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you've seen that throughout your career, and the way that you can, like the connections that you've made through sport and through rugby that have then led to opportunities.
Absolutely.
To go places, work, things like that.
Yeah. So. And there's also, it seems in life that there's so many barriers to doing things, so many excuses and strings attached and organisational stuff to arrange. But that was literally, I googled best place to live, I googled the rugby team, I went onto my email, then I booked the flights. It was all in one day, and then the flight was for like 4 days' time.
Really?
So then I drove home from work, and Mel said to me, "Oh, how was your day?" And I said, "Well, I've just quit my job and I'm going to Vancouver on Friday. Just like a one-way trip."
So Mel's your now wife?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
And I was thinking, this is going to kick off, but it's something I just feel I need to get away and go and explore. And
how long did you have a plan of how long you were going for? at the time?
No, it was just kind of like
Open-ended trip.
yeah,
Right. Okay.
didn't have a visa or anything. So I thought she was going to kick off and it was going to be this huge argument, but it was something I felt really strongly about.
Yep.
I didn't feel settled where I was. It was time to, I've been in the Midlands for 4 years. And she said, all right, go for it. That's what you want to do.
Brilliant.
So she had a year of her PhD still to finish, so she just said, go for it. So then I went.
So it was then a long-term relationship with Mel. You went to Vancouver.
Long distance, yeah.
Long. What did I say?
Long term.
Long
yeah.
term.
It had
Sorry,
been.
long
It was long term by that
distance.
point as well.
Long
Yeah. Yeah.
Long distance relationship with Mel, and you went to Vancouver and you're working in building sites.
Yeah. So I turned up and they picked me up from the airport, and the guy was driving me back and he was like, so what work have you got lined up, like all that sort of thing. And I was like, mate, I've got this bag on my back and that's it. And so he introduced me to the guy I was going to be staying with, this guy from New Zealand who was probably equally as impulsive about getting there. And we just totally hit it off, and we said we've got no work planned, neither of us. So they said, right, we'll ask the rugby community.
Yeah.
And they said the only jobs they've got available for illegal migrants is labourers on the building site.
Yeah.
So we're like, perfect, sounds great. So we would just get up crack of dawn, we would go to the building site, and basically we were like diggers.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than like a machine digger, they would give us shovels,
humans,
and they'd be like, get that ground from that height to that height, and then you can go home. So you'd be like, right, and then we just get stuck in and just dig all day.
Then it gets 2016. You come home from Vancouver for a visit, and were you planning on just making some money to then go back?
Yeah, that was basically the plan. So all the money.
How long were you in Vancouver for?
It was about 11 months, 10, 11 months.
Is it the best place to live in the world?
It was brilliant. I loved it.
Better than Glasgow?
It's different. It's similar in a lot of ways, actually. The people are really nice, but I think it's more like where I was at the time in my life.
Right.
It was just got a really good place, in my memory. But yeah, so I saved up the money from labouring, which was barely anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very expensive place to live, and I saved up enough to book a trip to Hawaii and flights over to Vancouver from Mel. So she came over at Christmas time.
Right.
We went to Hawaii, and then we went back home for Christmas. And the idea was I was going to do a bit of work, so I set up a little sole trader business just to do anything called HOKO. And
Sole trader to do anything, was that architecture?
no, it wasn't. I wasn't an architect
right,
by that point. So
okay.
I'd done my 2 degrees and my year out, but I could do graphic design. I could do a bit of website stuff.
Where
just
did the
generally.
name come from?
So HOKO came from the guy that I was living with in Vancouver, who was who turned up there, the same situation as me. He was a Maori guy from New Zealand, and I remember asking him about the Maori language and stuff, and there was this word.
I thought you were going to say that. I thought it was going to be like that kind of origin.
Yeah, and it's like a word for like commerce, but the way he described it was almost like it's like no bad debts.
Brilliant.
So like get paid on
Cool.
time.
Right.
And I thought that's probably quite a good backbone for a business, and
Definitely.
it sounds a bit like home, and I just thought I liked the look of the word.
Mm-hmm.
So I set up this little business just for myself to do bits and bobs, and did that through January and February. So Mel was down in Leicester still doing her PhD, so she came up for Valentine's Day, and then the month after that, in March, she told me she was pregnant. So that kind of like put a little halt on my looking on Skyscanner.
Mm-hmm.
Went to Rightmove instead.
Right.
And yeah, we found out I had to kind of get serious.
Right. So how long was that?
That was start of 2016.
2016, and that's where
when I was
HOKO
25
became an architect's practice. Is that right?
Not quite. So I had this kind of realization where I'd spent all my money in Vancouver.
Yeah.
I just set up a little business. Just turned 25 years old. I've done 2 parts of my training, but I'm not an architect. I've never worked for an architecture practice. I've just set up this little business. I've got a couple of little designy contracts going, but nothing really long term. And now I'm going to be a dad.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to weigh up my options, and I did the sensible thing and went and applied for a load of jobs at architecture firms. So I applied for 8 jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I got offered 7 of those jobs, and they were really kind of promising, and I was thinking about going for it. And I had this kind of really kind of anxious moment of this is me now. That's it. I go get a job, I sit in traffic again, and that's me. And raise kids, do the right thing, putting money into a pension, and I felt like that's my life over. That's the adventure stopped already, and I just thought that's not right. I want to kind of try a bit harder than that. So I decided just to go for it with the business and just see what I could do.
Do you think the fact that the looming like baby that I heard you describing it as, it's not something that you can like postpone very far.
Yeah.
Like, it's a case of, there is a deadline coming.
Yeah.
I need to have my shit together by then.
Yeah.
Did you feel that at that time?
Yeah, it was like a countdown,
like
a countdown timer on my like what I
Getting
thought
things
my life
sorted.
was going to be. Yeah, definitely. It's a terrifying time, but it I think for men especially who've grown up with a really prominent male role model,
Yep.
you change from looking up to them and trying to fulfill, their shoes, to being like, shit, it's my shoes. I need to be that for somebody now.
Yeah.
And then you're like, right, what am I going to do? I need to do some main character shit, as they say. So that's when I was like, no, I can actually do this. I'm going to go for it.
So what did that look like?
It looked like absolute chaos. A huge amount of time wasted doing loads of stuff, but just energy. Just trying to figure out ways of moving forwards. Huge learning curve of actually getting things going. Managed to get a mortgage, got a house, Mel moved up, the baby was born. And the first kind of 3 years of HOKO was really just, can I provide for a family? So Mel wasn't working, she was a full-time mum, and I took on that kind of mantle of provider, and just had to kind of make it work. Had to cover the basics, but also we started doing quite well, and I felt like I've kind of got a bit of a knack for this, of like going out there, winning work, managing my time. I was working a lot of hours, but still carving out enough to still play rugby. I think it's a middle child thing of not compromising. So I didn't want to compromise on not playing rugby, of having my health, spending time with my family, but still have a business.
You still do that now, do you?
Yeah,
You
so
keep really active, you're very busy,
Yeah.
active dad. Like, do you think that just carries through?
I think so. It's a decision to be made. How do you want to spend your time? There's more than enough time in the day to get stuff done, and you just got to do things that
I've seen you talk
really
about
care
that
about.
quite a lot, like Instagram stories and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
where you're talking about how it can be sometimes difficult to find time to go
Yeah.
to the gym or get out a walk or whatever else, and making time
Yeah.
and being really consistent.
See, do you know what the truth is? Like, death's coming for us all. It is. And if you can feel something, like, lean into that. So I definitely find that I gain huge amounts of value from doing things that make me feel things, whether that's a workout or spending time with people, or working on my business, winning a customer, doing something well for somebody. It's like, if you get these like little moments, surely that is why this means something. This can't be pointless. I think it's the human spirit to feel things. And we live in this time now where we've got everything we could possibly want. If you can't carve out good feelings and positivity and happiness now, you're never going to get it. So I find that I have a huge amount of happiness in my life, regardless of the problems and the amount of stuff that I'm trying to juggle all the time.
So like the stresses and all the problems that then come with running a business.
That's part of
like
it. That's part of it.
So you lean into it, enjoy it.
Lean into it. Just like feel it.
Brilliant.
And I think that once I kind of realised that, my anxiety totally went. I was such an anxious person, to the point where I'd have a meeting at 9 o'clock and I wouldn't sleep all night thinking about how the conversation was going to go. And now I go into really stressful situations, or situations where I really have to perform at my best, and I'm really content, really calm, and I just really enjoy it.
So one of the weirdest things about the business that you've started is, I think, the fact that you've never actually worked in that business. So obviously it's a professional services, architecture, but you've never actually worked in an architecture practice. And it'd be a bit like someone graduating from law and setting up a law practice rather than going and getting a job and building up that experience before they set up the business. So talk us through that. How? Why?
Yeah, it's funny when you say it like that. It seems like obviously a bad idea, but I think there's definitely something in like naive optimism and a little kind of like smithering of arrogance to think you can do things better. And
here's the question. So the question that comes to me is, if you hadn't done that, if you'd done it the other way and went and learned this is the way that things work, do you think that it would have grown as quickly and been as successful if you'd run it the way that others run it?
I don't think so. I think that if I'd gone down a traditional route, then it would be impossible to actually solve this problem that I'm still trying to solve. The reality is, in architecture and construction, these life savings that people put into their homes are not perceived as being of any real value.
Yeah.
It's seen as being a compromise on your qualification and the industry as a whole to be doing just that type of work. And I felt that firsthand when I would meet other architects and we'd have the conversation of what are you working on? And I say extensions, and I could see the look in their eyes, that kind of like, oh right, you're like one of those guys. And
really? Right, okay.
yeah, and it's, I kind of saw it the other way.
So what are they working on? The people who look at that, are they working on, they're designing
So
museums?
the thing is, it's saying, I'm working for Scott Brown Rig Architects or Foster's and Partners, big names, big, huge organisations that have been around for a long time. There's history, there's prestige. It's like any big brand in an industry carries a weight of confidence and reliability, and you can be proud of being a part of that. But for me, I didn't want to be a small cog in a big machine. And the thing that I found really valuable in design especially was like the human interaction, that deep connection with the customer and what it is they're actually getting and affecting that and being part of like their journey, rather than being, drawing a setup for one small part of a massive building.
Yeah.
So everyone has their own kind of different thing that gets them going, but for me that just didn't appeal.
See, when you're now that you do 150 projects a year, you've got a team of 15 in a studio, does that go away? Or do people still go, oh, home extensions, like, and kind of the perception's still the same? Or have you like kind of conquered that?
I think maybe I don't notice it as much because I just don't care.
Yeah.
But I think that we've done enough, and I think some architects are aware of us, that they're thinking they might actually be onto something now.
Yeah.
The typical person that we were competing with before was an architect goes through their training. Obviously, as you said, you have to work for another architect practice to be able to get your final qualification. I managed to find a loophole to get through that. You go up the ranks of getting more and more responsibility and experience. You end up going on site until the point where you're probably at your youngest in your 40s, where you could do all of it yourself.
Yeah. And
And then you're still in a big organization. Architects are chronically underpaid. And then you think, do you know what? I actually want a lifestyle. So they set up, insert your initials with architect at the end, practice, and you start getting customers. It's a bit of word of mouth. But you're dealing with engineers, you're dealing with building control, planning, builders, customers, running a business. Like, where's the time for design? And the only way you can actually make that work is with the economy of scale of getting bigger projects. So then you start going into the same cycle as everybody else of small volume, high value projects. Whereas I wanted to change that and do high volume, lower value projects. And that meant a huge amount of innovation to create a system where design could still be the priority. And that is the really challenging problem, because doing the design and the drawings is unfortunately the really easy bit. That's the really fun bit.
delivering the job.
Delivering the whole thing and making sure you get the right contractors, you get the right design, it's on budget. That's where it becomes really, really difficult.
So I'm not in your industry, but I would imagine there's also a far more like fulfilling part of the job. The fact that you delivering somebody like an amazing extension on their family home versus like delivering a beautiful hotel or a museum or something like that. The fact that it's what it's like contributing towards their life, and like you say, their life savings going into it, and being able to take it from like that they're in safe hands all the way through.
Yeah.
Surely there's something more fulfilling about delivering that than delivering a big city centre development.
Yeah, it certainly means a huge amount to me. I think that home is this thing which gets battered around, where until you go through a really difficult time, or until your country is under threat, or a family member is ill, you don't really fully appreciate how important it is. And I've seen it through my kind of growing up and with my family, how important home has been. It's been the most sacred place that we could all exist. It's where we have the best times, and it's where we get together when we've got really hard times. So I think that we're so lucky that we've got that space, that if I can then kind of get that and for as many other people as possible and make this kind of the dream come true, it's a good investment for them. Right. It's the space that they're super proud of. I think that's such an important thing to be able to do. But the business part of it is that it's probably, I looked this stat up a while ago, and it was something like 55% of all the revenue in construction is on home renovations. So it's more than all these big civic buildings.
Right.
And
It's almost like there's a wee niche here that you're like, I'm quite happy to be.
Well,
to
yeah,
play
I mean,
to fish in this pond.
Yeah.
Like, because it actually is a far bigger pond than it appears.
But there's 55,000 architects in the UK. Like, can you name one of them? Can you name the practice that does that?
No, you're bang on. So to create a brand that's the go-to for homeowners architects.
Yeah.
That's
so if
plan.
someone wants to do something on the house where they're spending, 50 grand, 100 grand, 200, whatever. If they think, I want to change my home, I want to make where I live the best it possibly can be.
Mm-hmm.
If they think HOKO, that's where we want to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And you can only do that by actually delivering on it every single time. But to deliver on it, there's so many component parts, there's so many people involved, systems, different processes, that, by leveraging technology and stuff, we've started to innovate a thing that's still changing, but it definitely feels like my life's work to crack that problem, to be able to do that successfully every single time. And I think that's the big idea that's always been bubbling, and it's been my kind of passion from day one is, if I can crack that problem, that's my satisfaction.
Right. If anyone is interested in this, well worth following Danny on Instagram. Is it HOKO Danny?
HOKO Danny, yeah.
And you break down a lot of these jobs. So you go, this is the before, this was the plan, these are the drawings, this is what we delivered after. And that content, I think, is really, really valuable for anyone that's interested in it, but also like your builders, your potential customers, and being able to kind of really be consistent with that. Is that something that I know that it's part of all that kind of personal brand work that you've done now has led to even more in terms of the presenting job, but how important has that been to the growth of HOKO? So like all your social content and the way that you engage with your audience?
Yeah, I really struggled to generate the social content. I don't know what it is. There's that kind of barrier there that I feel like I've got better recently, but I feel like maybe documenting that journey is a massively missed opportunity, because there's so many clever bits in what we do that people just don't see. So many problems within the industry. The way I generally go about it is we offer out all of our inquiries and our clients to join like free webinars, and I'll just freewheel on a topic. And they always come back and say, there were so many good insights there, that it's that kind of knowledge. So I think it's vitally important to feel confident enough to talk about your subject matter and not kind of create in secret all the time.
So on the Business Playbook, we really like to dig into like all the good and all the bad. Has there been one particular day or one particular job where things just haven't went right, and it's the one that jumps out to you as like that was the worst one, or like, have you got that? Is there something that jumps to mind when I ask you that?
Yeah, there's loads. Right. It's like,
Can you talk us through like
the biggest lessons?
What's gone wrong, and then how you've overcome it, what you've learned?
Yeah, I think that sometimes I do think about like the little boy who was selling the Bob the Builder cassettes in primary school, and like all these different hustles along the way, and who I am now. And one of my biggest kind of regrets, which I think for anybody starting a business, they should take this really seriously, is that your inner child is going to take an absolute pummeling. Don't expect to, have that same belief in people at the end of this. The big problems we've ever had have come down to a person. So we had a HR issue with somebody we employed who was with us for 3 months and then stormed out one day. And I was like, what on earth? That's crazy. Texted him, asked him if he was okay, and didn't hear. And then we got a letter in from ACAS that there's a claim against us for discrimination. And I was like, oh my goodness, like what could this like possibly be? And it turns out that the fella who was in his late 30s had a history of anxiety, and he felt like that there was no real kind of justification for it. But that he just wanted to leave and he just couldn't stay. And it turns out that he'd done that at 3 other jobs. Right, yeah. And he ended up getting a payout from our insurers. And that's what he was in it for. And I spoke to the previous people he'd worked for, and they said, if only you'd checked your references, we would have told you, run a million miles on this guy. Because he goes in, he has he creates a situation, and then he leaves. And because of the way the HR system works, the employers are completely vulnerable to, you're wrong until you're proven right, as it's totally different to the legal system. So that was a really kind of sore one, I find. It didn't really cost us anything financially, but I feel like
the insurance guy, but it could have. I mean, he was
it absolutely could have.
Probably didn't know the details of your insurance at that time when he put in that claim.
Yeah, no, probably not. But his partner at the time, her profession was in employment tribunals and supporting employees, so it was a thing that they were just doing together. It's kind of romantic, actually. But
just scamming people.
I know.
Like, did they get a decent payout? This is not a business idea that we should be chasing.
Yeah, there's a new business model. Yeah, that could be a dating site. Yeah, couldn't it? Yeah, it was. It wasn't an amount of money that is going to change your year, but it was just one of those ones where I felt that I'd completely misjudged somebody's character,
right?
And I felt really stupid. And what I kind of felt like after that time was that any new person that was coming into the organisation or even my vicinity, I was questioning myself so much more.
Really, okay.
Yeah, and
Is
it's like
that impact the rate that you were hiring at and the way you were hiring?
No, we went into a huge series of hires after that. It was just the timing of where the business was.
Right.
But it definitely challenged my kind of faith in people and treating people well. I feel like quite often I found that the better you treat people, sometimes it just backfires anyway. That actually just keeping things professional and keeping yourself guarded is often the best way to go.
That's interesting.
When we started, we had these ideas of unlimited holiday and so much flexibility and having a really close relationship with people, and I was trying to affect other parts of their life in a positive way, and I've kind of turned away from that to some extent off the back of certain situations. So that's one that stands out as being...
How long ago was that? Because I listened to a podcast you were on 2 or 3 years ago with Andrew Morrison.
Oh, yeah.
And you were talking about, the culture, and we're trying to provide people with this and that, and I don't know if that was maybe that was maybe 3 years ago. So
it probably happened. It happened before that.
Right,
it's probably happened about 4 years ago.
Right, okay. What's the culture like now? So what do you do actively to encourage a great culture? I know you've got an amazing studio, and you've now just moved into the social hub in Glasgow. So what do you do to kind of positively impact culture in the business?
We treat everybody fairly. Everybody, has their moments to kind of contribute to the wider mission of the business. I think that there's never any shouting in the office. Nobody is expected to work late. There's a huge amount of flexibility with, life stuff that comes along the way. I think ultimately we've definitely got a space which feels so much more mature, but we've got a kind of a core group that are really pushing for something that's going to affect change. Right. Because the kind of the big vision of becoming that household name and affecting all these other homes is sometimes a very hard thing to articulate when I feel so strongly about it, and that I can't put that onto people, because it then becomes this kind of overbearing thing which becomes quite unpleasant. So I think it's about kind of being open enough but giving people the freedom to do their best work, and then celebrate that. So the culture we've got now is really efficient. Is that a right way to describe a culture? It's a really efficient culture for where the business is at just now. Okay.
Where the business is at just now. So you talk about where it is now, and I know you're in the process, or you've recently raised a bit of finance. Is that right?
No, our last raise was in 2021.
Oh, really? Right. Okay.
Yeah, so that was a crowd fund.
So you've done a crowd fund. You've done Scottish Edge. There's a couple other
we did
kind of routes that you've taken.
Yeah.
What's the plan for HOKO?
Yeah, so the funding thing is a funny one. I remember kind of going through that journey and talking to people whilst raising investment. Right. It's a surreal experience because it takes an absolute surreal amount of energy to pull something like that off. You need to have such a clear vision, but the truth is that once you get the finance, to stick to a plan is sometimes not the best thing to do, and you need to be able to pivot and adjust, and it requires a huge amount of faith from people investing to trust the owner to actually do something sensible. So what I felt like we were doing was sensible at the time, which was scaling geographically across the whole of the UK to get as much, actual physical coverage as we could get. And what I discovered was that it's actually a very hard thing to manage those different locations.
Right.
And actually, by scaling it back to Glasgow and Edinburgh, we could dominate those markets better and get our efficiency so much better.
So do you mean basing yourself out of Glasgow and Edinburgh? Do you mean like operating in Glasgow?
No, so I mean operating in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
So what we found was that by like condensing our marketing spend geographically where we would travel to, our efficiencies went through the roof. So we're doing the same number of projects and the same revenue as we did with a team that was 4 times the size.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's become increasingly.
One of the things you talked about when you were on the podcast with Sir Tom Hunter and Lord Willie Hockey was the overhiring that you done.
Yeah.
And when you first then got money and a cash investment that you felt that you were then overhiring, growing the team to the point where it was kind of squeezing margins?
Yeah, I mean, the one of the biggest cultural problems that entrepreneurs face is when you've got a fast growth company that's trying to solve a major problem, being like the 0 to 1. Everybody you meet, they're constantly saying, how many people have you got now? Why is people a metric of success?
It's mad. And I'm guilty of it as well, because we literally done it at the start of this podcast.
Yeah.
You've got a team of 15, when I've actually spoke to people who have a massive team, people with a tiny team, but it's like you say, it's why is that a metric? Says we are guilty of it on this podcast, I must say.
Yeah, I know. Stop doing that.
So what are the metrics of success? What's the metrics that you, as the leader of HOKO, what metrics do you use?
So for me personally, the thing that allows me to sleep well is knowing that the business is running smoothly, and I can probably measure that with the number of problems that we're dealing with on a daily basis. We track so much data, and the reality is that if you've got a percentage of issues that is maybe like less than 1% of your client base, you're in a really good space. I think there's so many kind of parts of innovation that we're building in with AI and automation, and seeing those things go from like a concept to something you can actually use with real clients, that is so satisfying as well. So I think for us, it's about, how can we track, our client base, how much efficiency we're getting out of our team to deliver more for our clients and their experience. Our kind of mission is that perfect client experience. That's what we're trying to deliver on every single occasion. So I can kind of measure that through the content that we're given to them on their designs, and also the feedback we're getting in terms of problems. So that's kind of how I measure it. And I think that once we get to kind of a critical mass, and we're kind of there just now where we've got such a strong foothold, people are really looking at us, that's then the opportunity to think, okay, how do we get the right people in to then scale up that best version of the model? And that's the point where you have to look at yourself and think, okay, I'm maybe the ideas guy. I'm probably not a CEO. I'm not the high growth guy. It's like, okay.
Do you think you'd ever move out of that role and appoint someone who's better suited to that role if it was the right move for the business?
I would absolutely love that. Yeah, to someone else to deal with all the people problems. Yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
So you then open up the personal brand side. So something that you've obviously built and focused on is building Danny from HOKO. And that's now starting to really pay dividends with your recent appointment to is this now your second series of the...
Second series is starting filming in 2 weeks.
Right, of Scotland's Home of the Year.
Yeah.
So there's a really interesting story about how that job came out, how that casting came about. But can you talk us through how it came about and what that's been like, that journey? Yeah,
so it got to the point where the business was kind of, it was doing well, kind of really comfortable with the subject matter. And I remember I was on the phone to my mum in the car. She's a huge fan of the show, and she was saying that, you'd be great on that. Get your elbows out, go and get involved and knock on some doors. And I was saying, just Mum, will you just kind of like stay in your lane, let me kind of do my work. And the next day she emailed me, probably the only email she's ever sent me, with she Googled who the producers were, and she sent me the details of this woman, Carlin, and then the same week, Carlin emailed me. And I was like, surely not. Karen, have you gone and contacted them on my behalf? Because that is not okay. You can't be doing that on my behalf. And it wasn't. It was a coincidence. And what had actually happened was we'd hired an architect through a recruiter. And then around the 3-month point, the architect decided she didn't want to do architecture anymore, and she went into a different career path. I ended up working for that.
You paid the recruiter.
Yeah.
For that, so it cost you a lot of money, basically.
Yeah, and it was one of those like really sore ones where she said, "Oh, Danny, can we have a chat?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course, let's go have a chat." And it's never going to be good when someone says that. And we went and sat in this room, and she said, "I'm really sorry, but I thought the job move would rekindle my love of architecture, but I just don't want to be an architect anymore."
Really?
And I was at that point thinking in my head, how much does this cost?
Was that a Friday afternoon?
Probably.
Andrew Dobby from Made Brave. So Andrew's podcast live on YouTube. If you've not watched it, fire back and give it a watch. Andrew Dobby from Made Brave said, people always bring these problems to you on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
Is it because they want to get it out of their system before the weekend? He's like, so they fucking dump it on you just ahead of your weekend, ruin your weekend to free up their own. So
I almost certainly was. But it was one of those moments where, I could have tried to persuade her to stay.
Right.
I could have let out my frustration by being pissed off. But she was a good person. It was coming from a good place, and just let it go. And it's one of those ones where you just have to like bottle it up, digest that, and that'll turn into something else when I'm older.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that on her starting this new job, she overheard a conversation that they were looking for another architect, and she went and said, "Oh, my old boss would be really good for that." So that's kind of how it was passed on, very, very quickly.
Like you say, the good karma of not losing your shit then.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I mean, it's like there's literally nothing good ever comes from having a go at people.
No.
Nothing. Never.
So you went to this casting for Scotland's Home of the Year.
Yeah.
Did you have the brand that you are now, if you like? Did you have that all figured out? Was there any of it intentional? So I said to somebody, I've got Danny from HOKO coming on the podcast, and they went, "Is that the guy in the Crocs?"
Yeah.
So all these kind of wee factors that make up now what people know as you.
Yeah.
Was that intentional? Was that to help you to get that part, or was it all? Is this all just kind of? Is this just you?
Is it? Yeah, or is it a costume? Like a weekend Hawaiian shirt.
You know the way that people might go, right, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and there's strategy behind it. They plan it out.
No, it's very deliberate. And I've been wearing Crocs for years. It's not just like this new thing I've done for attention. A few years ago, I just got rid of all my clothes and just got black clothes. I was going to say that, black t-shirt. Super simple. It's the Steve Jobs thing, and I just found it so much easier because I was going from like a building site to an investor meeting to a client meeting. I thought I just need something that's consistent. The Crocs thing was even more deliberate because I was kind of at this point where I'm trying to do this like big thing. And it sparks a lot of kind of judgment. Right. And then I felt kind of like we live in this like unfree world where you're kind of very much I've certainly felt overpowered by the feeling of what other people might be thinking of me. Mm-hmm. And I felt like the only way to be free in this like unfree world of opinion was to really not care at all. And putting on my Crocs every day is like a physical like reminder that it really doesn't matter what you wear, and it's almost gone the full circle where it's become this kind of like security for me that I can be myself and I can say the things that I truly believe in, because the external stuff and the faff, and it doesn't really matter, it's what's inside.
Love that. Danny, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It's been really, really interesting to kind of dig into your story. We're going to open some questions to the floor, so if anyone does have a question for Danny, let us know. Feel free.
I'm obviously very focused on sales, and when I go into small businesses, I talk to small businesses exactly what you've talked about trying to find your ideal client, your niche, your message, your reason why, your differentiators, and you've kind of naturally progressed into that, which I find is really inspirational. But how much of that was intentional and how much of it was accidental, and how much of it have you found and discovered looking back on your past rather than in the future? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Sales and like being able to make a sale, I find is a really kind of unique innate skill that some people have and some people don't. And I kind of believe that because we've hired salespeople before who you think would be great and they really struggle in that environment. So I've definitely like tried to pick up certain things that I can try and give people to train them in that space, because architects aren't trained on sales. For me personally, I really care about the subject matter. I don't really care about the financial part of it. So to get there and to show enthusiasm to be able to go in and design someone's home is something I genuinely do want to do anyway. I think with the experience behind it, and the validation of where the business is at, people find it quite believable, and it's a natural progression for them. With architects that were coming into a sales role for the first time, I tried to like dissect that in a slightly different way. So I said there's like 4 things you need to do. So you first need to listen. Don't get in there and start chap, selling to them, because people switch off. You need to understand what it is they're telling you. So really listen. Don't just like give them the time to talk. Understand it. You need to then explain to them like the benefits of kind of how we do things. And then finally give them the empathy. So the empathy of, understanding that it's a huge commitment, what they might be scared of. And it's kind of those 4 things. And the final part is, you're turning up there, they're super excited. I mean, most people who are going to do an extension, it's the second most expensive thing they'll ever do. Usually comes at a point of life where they're quite settled and they've got things organised, and they want the excitement as well. So treat it like a first date. So they kind of listen, understand the benefits, the empathy obviously spells lube. So if you're going on a first date, would you not want to forget? So that's kind of like how I tried to explain it to them. That it's like those things all together kind of makes quite a compelling environment where they can get on board with us.
Another thing you said that was really interesting was that people who are going to spend 150 grand or whatever on an extension, you said that in the industry, some people aren't even interested in like attending that quote. Like they're not bothered. It's a small project, a small amount of money. But if somebody was going to spend 150 grand on a car, they would be sat down like a glass of champagne, treated like royalty. So like realising that 150 grand that someone's going to spend on their house is a lot of money to a lot of people that they've worked hard for, they've saved for, and you like make them feel special throughout that journey.
Absolutely, and it's one of the things that just seems so obvious to me. Right. Why should they not be treated with the respect? And it should be an exciting experience for them. They should get the bells and whistles, and someone needs to guide them through that. But the reality in construction is that it's kind of small, unless you can kind of do a higher volume. So that's kind of where we've kind of hit our mark. The other thing with them spending that much money is that you're spending that on a car. The risks are depreciation. The risks when you spend that on your house are massive. You get a bad builder, you could be in a really bad situation very, very quickly, and it's not something you can escape from.
Does that then reflect badly on you when something like that happens? So if someone does get a bad builder and you're project managing that, have you ever been in that situation where...
Yeah, and it's a really kind of unfortunate one, because I feel like we always treat people fairly. We're very kind of moral in terms of how we operate. But if you get a bad situation, quite often everybody disappears, and the last one left is the architect. Who's the liable, the professional person. There's some things that are completely out of our control, and it's sometimes a really difficult one to take. But generally, if you followed good professional practice, the things kind of resolve themselves. But yeah.
And do you have like builders that you work with all the time? And like I know you work with Sean Rollo through in Edinburgh.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, those guys are absolutely great. So I mean, this is why it's so...
who you trust, that they're good, that their work's good, they're reliable. Are you more likely to work with people like that, or are you instructed by them? How's that?
We help the homeowner find all these kind of different people.
Side.
Yeah, right, totally. Okay. But that's why building good relationships with businesses like Rural Developments or like Newford in Glasgow. These are guys we love to work with because they really care as well. They they take pride in their work, and they're trying to build a brand as well. So that's kind of where you get a really nice synergy. So having a network is one of those valuable things the client can get, come into a business that wants to build a brand in a space.
Sean?
So I've had a bit of a bad experience with employees as well. And I've kind of went from 1 to 0, and then I just went from right up to 3, kind of back to 0 again. What kind of advice would you give to scale? Because I found it just a bit of a pain in the arse, and it's really, really difficult. It comes with all its problems. You stop doing what you're doing. So any advice on that would be great.
Yeah, growing a business is a pain in the arse. It's like you hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, you were saying about is there a bad experience that sticks out in your mind? There's loads, but there's loads of like really good luck moments. And so I've not got a co-founder, but the first person I employed, Simon, our managing director, was the biggest bit of luck I've ever had in business. Like a really solid, reliable person who's the complete opposite to me. And we just hit it off, and then it's then growing a team around that, and it's figuring out, you're not trying to replicate yourself. I think it was Richard Branson was saying that every good business needs an entrepreneur, a manager, and a technician. So it's like figuring out what bits can you not do, and then who's going to fill those things. But where we live just now, in time, is so empowered by technology that the chances are that if you really take the time to think about what roles you're trying to fulfill, chances are there'll be technology out there that can do it. So if it's a thing that only a person can do, then that's where you need to be like super selective. But I'd probably wait until you're bursting at the seams, that you've got enough work for that person, and then go for somebody who's got good experience and who'll watch you back. Because I've been in a situation before when, I've tried to replicate myself and it just creates chaos. I don't need another version of me. That's a nightmare. So it's like having people that have, their own kind of unique skills. But finding the right people is really, really difficult. Really difficult.
Amazing. I'm going to jump forward and almost give a trailer to the next podcast with John Hamilton's in the room now. If you're interested in that, like the makeup of a good team, I'm pretty sure that John's going to touch on that with his co-founder and the way that he kind of has built his team. Mark Glasgow from the Edinburgh Bullock Company is also in the room, who is a future guest on the Business Playbook, who's got a very similar situation with the managing director that he's just put in place at the Edinburgh Bullock Company. So we'll definitely be touching on that in future episodes with John Hamilton and Mark Glasgow. But for now, Danny, thank you so much. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Cheers.